Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough for me right now. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Justin Valancourt, who is the CTO of Dooley. Hey, Justin, how are you doing?
Not too bad. Friday morning, drinking some coffee, chatting with you. So things are good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very, very well. Now, Justin, for the folks that are not familiar with yourself and Dooley and things, can you tell me a little bit about you and also the work that you do?
Yeah, for sure. So without going too into detail, because we'll never finish, but essentially, I'm currently the chief technical officer at a company called Dooley. We make software for revenue teams to break down basically silos that get in the way of selling and also delivering a great customer experience. As for myself, I'm originally from Eastern Canada. I live on the West Coast now, grew up and got interested in programming at a really young age, I'd say. Found a community of people doing game console hacking. And that's kind of how I got really interested into this stuff and managed to sort of teach myself programming. Started a website focused on that. Got my first sort of software gig in my last year of high school, and then rolled through a bunch of different startups afterwards, doing consulting as well as full-time gigs. Moved out west, worked for a couple of years, met my co-founder, and then started Dooley. So that's the high-level overview of myself and my career today, I guess.
Awesome. Now, the reason that we organized this time to chat was, well, one of the reasons is because I wanted to learn a little bit more about Dooley and the problems that you're solving, but I wanted to start by asking you about a recently released new piece of research that you've published called Dooley Sales Happiness Index Key Findings November 2021. So can you tell me about that and some of the highlights of the findings?
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, we released a piece of research called the Dooley Sales Happiness Index. Basically, what we've done is we surveyed 600 salespeople living in the United States, to figure out sort of how they're spending their time, as well as how has the pandemic changed things for them in their jobs, and sort of try to dig into some of the things we're solving with Dooley. So some of the key findings we found, and this is super interesting stuff, 77% of respondents actually said they're working more hours now than before the pandemic. 91% of sales reps say they work after hours or on weekends. 62% say they do this in order to catch up on admin tasks. And then 52% say they have to do this to successfully close deals. I think the result of working these extra hours and eating away into your personal lifetime is that 69% of respondents also told us that they've experienced burnout due to their job.
Right.
And 73% of those said that that burnout has had a really negative effect on their mental health.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, it just sounds like, and I know this is something that you tackle with kind of Dooley, but I mean, is it some of these, you're trying to tackle some of these issues, some of these numbers, as it were, reduce some of these numbers, make things a bit more effective and more efficient with what you're doing at Dooley. But I mean, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about some of the findings that stood out for me. And in particular, the research found that 74% of respondents agreed that much of their time at work is spent on activities that don't contribute to selling. Now, this echoes some other research that I've seen from people like Sugar CRM that suggests that greater than 50% of all salespeople's time is spent on non-sales related activities. But then there's this other finding that in your research that says that 81% said that if they could reduce time spent on non-revenue generating activities, they could generate more revenue for the company. And I was a bit like, imagine me kind of with a picture pulling my hair out. I've got short hair, so it's quite hard. I mean, what the heck's going on here or going wrong here? And what's it costing us? I mean, what are the sort of the implications for the overall customer experience?
Yeah, great question. I think it also powers back to some of the other findings I mentioned. What's really interesting to me about this is that sales reps are spending all this time on administrative tasks that is then leading to burnout, which is then causing them to not be able to succeed at their jobs. I think especially in this pandemic world, there's a need for greater sort of data and insights across organizations right now, which is leading to things like managers and organizations really needing sort of the ground floor reps to log their conversations and all the different details they're finding into internal systems. Sorry, I just lost an AirPod there, but I'm back. But the thing is, we hire sales reps for their ability to connect with people and their people skills, which often is actually the opposite of sort of like the administrative work that's a lot more mechanical and involves a lot less creativity.
Right.
So I think that we're asking them to do more of those admin tasks, and it's taking them away from selling activities. But most importantly, it's preventing them from having sort of that creativity to know when to engage with customers, to really keep the people they're talking to top of mind, because now they're stressing about these sorts of things as well, which often they can actually end up procrastinating as well. And then sort of like the to-do list builds up in the back of your head because it's not the sort of stuff that you enjoy as a salesperson.
Right.
Internal systems range from not only CRM, but nowadays we have things like Slack,
right.
Chat that can be hugely distracting, where people expect sort of the culture is that if someone pings you about something, you have to respond almost right away, or at least within the next few hours.
Sure.
I think also related, or a survey showed that 80% of sales reps feel that management don't really understand how time-consuming non-revenue generating activities are. And 78% say that this lack of understanding actually leads to misalignment between expectations and what can be achieved. So I think this is for any managers listening. I think it's really important to consider this. What is good for your reps will often be good for the customer experience and then for your business. So make sure to think about things holistically and not just in terms of, hey, we need all this data in, we've created these 100 fields in Salesforce and we need every single one of them captured to make sure that we have the context. Because that's only one piece of the puzzle.
And I think it seems to me that right at the very, very heart of all of this, this idea that there is the time it takes to do these admin tasks, and it might not necessarily be the best sort of work or the best sort of task that's suited to the characteristics of the people that are natural salespeople. But ultimately it gets down to the point where it feels like to me that these CRM systems are not designed with users, and particularly sales users, in mind. I mean, is that right?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. They're really not the people who buy, implement, manage CRM are not the end users, and they're really designed to give the business what it needs in terms of reporting, making sure that if someone leaves, there is a clean handover, all these sorts of things, which are hugely important. However, I think that one of the downsides is implementing CRM is a project that a company undertakes. And like any other project, it's really easy to overdo it and sort of try to build this perfect glass pyramid of all these fields, all this different information, all these different tools, when that you think, hey, if reps put all this stuff in, we'll be gold in terms of our needs. But just coming back to sort of what we were just discussing, I think as you're doing that, it's hugely important that you think about the end rep experience. That will help to make sure you have the right data and you're getting what you need out of it, as well as helping reps.
Yeah.
Ultimately, the customer experience.
I mean, yeah, because I think it strikes me as a huge kind of gap, and we'll get into kind of how you guys are trying to sort of solve for that. But I also know that you have a view, Justin, for tackling this, and that it's somehow related with company culture and making sure that your company culture is product driven. And when I read that first, I was a bit like, I went slightly cross-eyed. I was like, what? So can you explain to me what you mean by that?
Yeah, for sure. I think in terms of what we are doing with Dually is we built this product from the ground up for reps, realizing that what is good for the rep will be good for the business, the organization. When we started Dually and we were doing all sorts of customer research, what we discovered is actually that reps were, for example, taking notes from the conversations they're having everywhere except CRM. So right. I personally saw reps taking notes on desktop sticky widgets, new email bodies, pen and paper, you name it, someone's taking a note there. So what we've done is we've really aligned our company towards solving the needs of those end users with the expectation then that they will fall in love with the customer experience and also the product, so that they then share it with their coworkers, and ultimately, once their teams are on board, they sort of go up to their managers and say, "Hey, we need to use this because we can't do our jobs without it." And I think those are some of the ways that having a product-driven company culture where the entire organization is aligned behind this mission of making the best product for the user and not just for the check writer, is really helping us to cut through the noise and deliver, I think, a tremendous customer experience.
I mean, so how do you kind of, I mean, because that's, forgive me, but that's all very well and good sort of saying that, but how do you make sure your company culture reflects your product values? I mean, how do you kind of stay aligned with that? Because, you know, like you mentioned before, you can get into big kind of projects, and sometimes it's a bit like, oh, the project gets really interested in itself sort of thing, and making this and adding things on and adding things on and adding things on. So how do you make sure that your company culture continues to reflect your product values on an ongoing kind of basis?
Mm-hmm. I think there's a few components. I think one of them is it starts at the leadership level, at the strategy level. I think there needs to be very sort of close collaboration between leaders of different departments so that we understand that, hey, the goal of sales operations implementing the CRM is also to help the reps, which is ultimately to generate revenue and to make sure there's clean handover to customer success, and also that we're tracking all the right feedback so that product can then take those insights and engineering can build the right things. I think in too many organizations, you end up with silos where leaders are really looking out for their own departments. And so you need to really emphasize that and continuously sort of workshop that during your strategy meetings, your offsites. And then the second piece is having sort of value. We have a company value around this. So one of our values is to win together. And so we're able to sort of, by communicating that value, living it at the leadership level, and then sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? And kind of reinforcing that value regularly, pointing out when we have a Slack channel called Dooligan Props. We call ourselves Dooligans. And then when we see examples of people winning together, especially across departments, although it doesn't need to, it could be a team, but then, we call those things out and we reinforce it those ways. Okay. And ultimately that allows us to think about things holistically and really bakes that into the culture.
Okay. So, I mean, I think the best thing to do probably is to probably go back to your product and kind of like talk about dooligans and dooliganism.
Yes.
And how you've been able to bring the benefits of your product to life via some of a couple of examples of firms that are leveraging your tech and what they're doing and how it has benefited them. So if you could share with us a couple of examples just to kind of bring what you're doing and how you're doing it to life, because I think that's going to give people the full view of what dooliganism looks like.
Yeah, for sure. Just on the term dooliganism, I think when we started this company, me and my co-founder, Chris, we really wanted to build something different. And by different, I mean that ultimately Dooli today is an enterprise product in the sense that, you use Dooli for your job effectively.
Yeah.
And a lot of traditional sort of sales software is obviously like that top-down motion, sold to managers, etc. We wanted to come in with awesome design for the rep. And so dooliganism really starts, I think, with trying to be different.
Right.
And so coming back to sort of your question around examples of sort of how firms are leveraging our tech, how has it benefited them? So just to give a little bit of context around what Dooli is. So Dooli is a pipeline management as well as note-taking tool where reps take their notes in Dooley. We provide an amazing sort of product experience that they want to take their notes there because it's fast, it gets out of the way, but also it does work for them. Right. So once they've captured their conversations in Dooley, Dooley will then go and update all the systems and people that need to know about the conversation you've just had. So that includes Salesforce, Slack, Google Suite, G Suite, and much more. And this helps with a number of things. One is reps save a ton of time on those admin tasks. The business gets better data. Because there's better data, there's better collaboration. And now all the tools that you've bought on top of Salesforce or other software you've implemented now has the data to be able to generate better insights. On top of that, we sort of, now that the organization, the systems, the people are better informed, while you're taking notes in Dooley, we're actually able to connect those insights from the organization back to your note and ultimately your conversation in real time, so that you don't need to say, I don't know, or I'll get back to you. If, for example, a customer asks you about maybe your competitor's pricing.
Right. Yes. I mean, so it's not just about kind of capturing that, but it's also, I noticed that that it does things in kind of real time. I mean, it speaks to this, the nature of some of the environment, the remote working environment that many of us are still kind of in the midst of. So like if we were talking on a Zoom call or a Google call, it's like there's technology that's in the back and integrations in the background that are as I understand it, in real time, sort of monitoring that and looking for sort of keywords and prompts that might be able to surface kind of content that might be relevant to the conversation at that point in time. So allowing the rep or the person to stay present and focus on the conversation, but then the technology is there to assist them and surface stuff that's kind of there, so that might help them in the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly spot on.
And so, can you tell me? I mean, going back to the kind of the question, I mean, do you have a couple of examples of, say, firms that have, or even just like, I don't know if you mentioned brand names or not, but if they're just like sanitized stories of like what people have done or how it's helped them, the sort of problem that they face, and what the adoption of your sort of like tool has helped them do. And also kind of because does it speak to, some of the challenges that were surfaced in the research, i.e. the kind of reduction in burnout and time spent and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, I think at the heart of what we do is that reduction in burnout, in the sense that we are now taking away a lot of these administrative tasks and letting the software, sort of take them on for you. I think at the end of the day, the way I sort of see it is CRM was designed in the 90s. And back then, the technology was sort of, hey, we're not able to parse the raw conversations, the root core conversations. We need humans to sort of go and distill that. Hey, how much is the deal worth? How many seats, etc. But really, those are derivatives of the emails, the different conversations you're having. So what we're trying to do with Dooley is, now that we're a bit further along in terms of technology in the world, how can we leverage that to sort of do a lot of those things automatically from just the conversation you're having? In terms of firms, examples of firms, brand names, on our website, we have a number of logos. A lot of our customers are actually in the tech space today, but we have some amazing brands like Asana, Intercom, Procore, Figma, and they really leverage Dooley in, I would say, for pipeline management. So making sure that everything is up to date, and they can do that super quickly through our sort of pipeline feature. but also the real time information is really important to our customers, not only for sort of for sort of slightly more experienced reps who may benefit from their own talk tracks or companies' talk tracks or playbooks, but also just for sort of leveling up new reps who are still learning the product, still learning what to say, and maybe they haven't fully built their intuition around that. So we find that playbook specifically benefits companies in those two ways. And then the data gathering gets the administrative burden off reps' shoulders and gives the company way better data, and then improves handover, leads to better conversations, and ultimately just to be able to close more deals and deliver a better customer experience.
I mean, I think we'll make sure we direct kind of people to the website, and so that you can check out some of those kind of like stories.
Yeah, for sure.
Justin, I know that you're also kind of like deep in the tech kind of, the business and thinking about customer experience and stuff. And I see actually back in May of this year, you raised a bucket load of money to kind of further develop the product. So, obviously there's lots of people behind you that kind of really believe in your kind of vision. So what I wanted to do is maybe switch gears a little bit and ask you a few questions about sort of what do you think the future sort of looks like, and what does the future of service and experience look like? Because you're planning for that, you're building for that, right? And what are the key challenges that we've got to kind of navigate that lie ahead, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And even before we start recording this, I think you received a couple spam calls. I think the way I think about this, so we, in this world of people working remotely, especially, and with all the noise that's out there, I get probably 10 LinkedIn messages a day trying to sell me like offshore development services. I get multiple spam phone calls a day. I get a ton of email. What I'm finding is that, and then I think the interesting part about that too is like they're pretty much all generic. They're all the same. What I'm finding is that there's a lot more noise, and the way people are trying to cut through the noise is by generating more noise.
Right.
I think that there is like an opportunity for sort of companies to take a step back and think, hey, okay, we've kind of lost our way here a little bit. What is the right thing to do for the customer?
Right.
How can we help the customer in the moments that they actually need the help, provide value instead of a sort of fire stream of notifications, and then make sure that those sort of outreaches are, highly relevant and highly personalized. I was thinking about this earlier too. Sometimes I'm like, I wish people had a list of like, here are the things I need help with. And then other people could sort of offer solutions to those problems. So for organizations, I think really trying to get in tune with like, hey, here, as just a random example, like, hey, Justin's the CTO at Dooley. Dooley is a fast growing company. How maybe he needs compliance software to sort of close those bigger deals. Super random example. And
sure.
Sorry, just my AirPods slipped out again there. And just for the listeners out there, I actually don't need help with that at this point anymore. So please don't reach out about that. But
I think that's right. I mean, I think they kind of, it makes me think about the idea that something else that I've been thinking about recently, and it's the idea about like people want a personalized experience, right? And so customers want it, and companies want to deliver it because they know that if they do deliver it and they get it right, then it positively impacts on the relationship they have with customers, and it does good things for all the outcomes, all the kind of business metrics, right? But the problem is that while many companies are trying to do it, not many are really succeeding. And it seems that the recent research I've seen suggests that the biggest problem is that what customers kind of want and what brands are trying to deliver, there's a lack of a shared understanding about what personalization kind of means across the board. And therefore what you end up getting is brands that are almost not delivering, they're almost guessing at it. And you end up with this stream of notifications and things, but actually they maybe need to spend a bit of time, like you say, is like, if I've got this list of things, or if I could stipulate, here's how I'd like to be kind of contacted, or here's what I'd like to have help with, or this is what good looks like for me.
Right.
And then the brands were able to adapt to that. Then there's a likelihood that that's going to build a good starting point for a sustainable relationship going forward.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it's very challenging too, because some of these things are almost paradoxical. Like you think, hey, I need to do more outreach to get more leads and more interesting conversations, which is true to an extent. I have just a quick example of, so I recently was working with a realtor and purchased the place. And I think this realtor I have so much respect for, because of how thoughtful the entire experience was. And I'll give you an example.
Okay.
After I closed the place, I opened the dishwasher, older dishwasher, and the spring was broke. So the door slammed down and it broke the hinges.
Okay.
And I just told them, I was like, not sure if these were broke before, but I'm pretty sure I broke them. And he ended up basically, he just said, hey, let me. And the deal was already closed at this point. It was like, give me that for give me a couple of days. And he calls me and he's like, hey, they did the inspection. I called the inspector. He didn't see it be broken. We reached out to the to the previous owner and see, he was basically trying to get them to cover it at that point, because I think he thought that maybe it was already broke. But ultimately, he ended up just e-transferring me money for a new dishwasher after the deal was already closed. And it's just that level of thoughtfulness is just next level. Investing in sort of the relationships for the long term, I think, is really important, and sort of taking planting seeds. And seeds can take a really long time to grow. But if you do that for a couple of years, eventually you have a good list of people in your network that you've built really solid relationships with. So comes back to not just pestering people with the fire hose of information, but really trying to be thoughtful and trying to develop that empathy within your organization to really think about hey, what do these people need? How can I help them?
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's a great point. And it's, I think it's almost a bit like going back to, it's like an old school way of doing things.
Yeah, totally.
And it's almost a bit like we probably need to learn from, the best things of the past, and then think about how we can fold them into the future. Because right now it feels like we've got caught up in this idea of things are getting run by technology rather than actually kind of and what we can do, rather than actually focusing on the relationships. And relationships are always very kind of human, and the technology should be there folded in to try and facilitate sort of that. And maybe should help us kind of think about how do we be thoughtful, and how do we plant seeds, and how do we track those seeds and nurture those seeds, but not in a way that we're forcing them to grow, but we're almost letting them grow.
Exactly. And I I think this is a huge theme across the board. Really, I think technology's helped us with a lot of things, and it's also made a lot of things much worse. And it hijacks kind of our need for instant gratification and trying to make things happen immediately. And I think it's detrimental in a lot of ways, and maybe someday we'll start to see more of a reversal on some of those trends. But it's going to be really difficult, I think, because it is kind of hardwired in our brain hardware to want to seek those immediate moments of dopamine and try to make that deal happen immediately. Those sorts of things.
Yeah, but then again, if you start playing that kind of long game and planting those seeds, then actually give it a little bit of time, those kind of things will start to happen naturally.
Exactly. Yeah. So learning to delay that gratification a bit. But you can also find moments of gratification through just building those relationships over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Justin, given the kind of the work that you're doing and the kind of because building a technology company and then trying to help kind of salespeople deliver a better experience to customers, because actually kind of, let's face it, kind of the sales process, particularly in the kind of B2B sales, is a huge part of the customer's experience. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't start well, then that can be a really informative and impactful, have a real big impact on their overall perception of what their experience was.
For sure.
And so I think it's really important that we kind of, because often in customer experience, we're not really talking about sales, and that's actually a big part of the process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So if I was to say to you, for somebody, you're trying to help a lot of people in that sort of sales space, particularly in the B2B and SaaS sales space.
Yeah.
For somebody listening to this or reading the highlights and they want to improve the service or experience they deliver to customers, or even just to get off on the best foot, mm-hmm. as it were, what would be your best advice?
Yeah, I think really curate empathy as a skill for yourself, and also if you're in a position to do it for your team. Challenge yourself to think through, hey, what does this person really need in this moment? How can I empower them to be successful and ultimately a hero within their company? I remember in Dooley's early years, a user that emailed us and sort of said, hey, Dooley was directly responsible for my promotion at his organization. And when I engage prospects, I try to ask myself, how can I get this person promoted at their job? Obviously in a way that like delivers value for the organization and for them. But having sort of like a North Star question that you can ask yourself, that gets you out of the weeds of like your myopic thinking and really reorients you towards what matters for this prospect, and how can I be successful at delivering that for them. I think is a pro tip I would give anyone that is easy to implement. Figure out what that one question is that gets you thinking from that point of view and also brings you back there. And then work to curate sort of that empathy skill and to build long-lasting sort of relationships.
I like the idea of kind of curating an empathy skill. That's a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things that also can seem a bit, how can I explain this? It's hard to know. It's hard to feel like you're making progress towards it because it's kind of like journaling or some of these other activities where sometimes maybe for some people it's hard to see sort of the value you're getting out of it. But I promise you that like over time, I think you will see the results.
Nice. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. So Justin, that's sort of all I've got right now in terms of for our meander around sales and the problem that sales reps kind of face and how the impact it has on customer experience and also impact it has on kind of them in terms of the products they use and kind of like the amount of time they're spent doing kind of admin and how that's impacting kind of their well-being and then how you're trying to solve for that, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, thank you.
But before we go, as I explained before we got started, I've been doing some ongoing word association collection since I published Punk CX back in the late spring, early summer of 2019. And for everybody that I've been speaking to on the podcast, I've been asking them sort of two sort of like word association questions. So if you're ready, I'm going to ask you those questions too.
Okay, let's go for it.
So the first one is, what one word, or two if you like, would you use to describe a more punk approach to customer experience?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this before the recording, but based on our conversation today, I'm actually going to go with, well, I'll give you two. I think empathy, or three, human and tribe. And the reason for that is you are probably way better versed in sort of the punk subculture than I am, but I think that punk is really about that. It's about sort of this idea of, hey, do it yourself, help each other out, find your people, speak your voice, sort of, and care about each other in a way that is maybe a bit more anti-corporate or anti-formula, if you will. So yeah, I'd say those three is what stands out to me.
Awesome, thank you. And so the second one is, what company or brand do you think epitomizes a more punk CX ethos?
Yeah, this is another sort of interesting one. I was listening to a podcast a while ago, and they were interviewing Ben and Jerry from Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream. I'm not sure if you have that in the UK.
Yeah, we love those guys. They're cool.
Yeah. So, and I think they were saying sort of like when they started, they some of the bigger players were trying to eat away at their shelf space and trying to muscle them out, and they sort of would go to the production plants with signs and do all these stunts to really be like, hey, we're making ice cream. We're small. I mean, back then, obviously now they're a bit more corporate, but we are, we're making really crazy, unique ice cream for the little guys. We are the little guys as well, right? Mm-hmm. So finding their people through that, and so that just resonated with sort of punk for me.
Awesome. Yeah, we like. I don't eat a lot of Ben and Jerry's ice cream, but I do like the sort of groove that they have, right? And what they do and how they do things. So they're cool.
They found their identity. They found a voice that's different than other ice cream brands.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, so that's it. Thank you for that. Thank you for first of all, kind of congratulations on your mission to make the work and the life of sales reps kind of easier and to improve the experience that their customers will get and will receive and will experience. Congratulations on the latest kind of like funding round. I know that's a bucket load of cash that's going to help you kind of build and scale, which is cool because it's a big problem to solve. And thank you for sharing your time and your insights with us today. That's been great.
Yeah, and likewise, great chat. Super enjoyed it. And I just also want to say I love what you're doing with sort of like this punk approach to this podcast and these different things. And I think it's great for all the people that are out there that are looking to learn more about this stuff. And I just really appreciate you sort of putting your thoughts out there and educating the broader community and connecting people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. That's awesome. Thank you. Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.